The wind clawed at the bus windows, as if trying to drag them backward, back toward the life she had barely escaped. Lena Harper pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the blurred lights of the interstate smear into yellow streaks. Her chest tightened every time she replayed the words her parents had thrown at her just hours before she fled, useless, irresponsible, ungrateful, incapable. Words she had spent 30 years trying to outrun. Words that still clung to her skin like smoke. Outside, dawn began to creep across the sky in pale, bruised colors, lavender melting into gray. Inside, the bus rumbled steadily eastward, carrying her farther from Chicago, farther from the house where she had learned to keep her voice small, her dreams smaller. She clutched the handle of her single suitcase, everything she owned packed inside its scuffed shell. Her pulse beat in her ears as she whispered to herself, "I'm not running away. I'm running towards something else, something I've never had." She didn't know yet what that was. A life, a purpose, a home. She only knew one thing with absolute certainty: she could never go back. The bus hissed at its next stop, brakes groaning as a few passengers shuffled off into the cold. An older man with a fisherman's jacket and salt and pepper beard climbed aboard, scanned the rows, and chose the empty seat beside her. He gave her a polite nod, warm but not intrusive. She nodded back and tugged her jacket tighter. "You look like you're carrying a whole storm on your back," the man said gently after a few miles. Lena gave a soft, breathless laugh. "Something like that. Heading far, far enough," she said, eyes fixed on the widening horizon. The man smiled with the tired wisdom of someone who had rebuilt himself more than once. "Good. Sometimes distance is medicine." His name was Theo, a retired fisherman from Maine. He told her stories about storms, about how the ocean didn't care who you were before you came to it. It only cared whether you were willing to learn. Lena listened quietly, letting his stories settle into the cracks inside her. "Why Maine?" he asked eventually. She hesitated. "I just need a place where no one knows me." Theo nodded as if he understood all the words she didn't say. "Then you picked the right corner of the world. The coast has a way of stripping you down and building you back up again. Saltwater's good for that." Her breath caught. "I'm not sure I'm strong enough to build anything." Theo studied her for a moment, then said, "Maybe strength isn't something you start with. Maybe it's something you grow into." The bus rattled deeper into dawn, carrying her toward the unknown. She spent the next hours watching fields turn into forests, forests dissolve into small towns, and small towns stretch into miles of rocky, untouched land. When fatigue overcame her, she dozed, lightly waking to the scent of coffee and the low murmur of travelers trading stories. She opened her notebook, a blank one. She bought at a gas station on the way out of the city and wrote a single line. "Maybe reinvention is remembering who I was before they taught me to be afraid." The sentence made her throat tighten, but she kept writing, small impressions, tiny memories, pieces of herself she thought she had lost. By the time the bus crossed into Maine, fog rolled across the roads in thick waves. The landscape felt raw and untouched, as if belonging to another century. Seagulls appeared overhead. The faint scent of saltwater drifted into the air. For a moment, Lena forgot to breathe. "This is it," Theo said, gathering his bag as the bus slowed. Bridgeton Harbor. Humble little place, but honest. Honest. She wasn't sure she'd ever lived somewhere honest. The bus hissed to a stop at a station barely big enough to be called one. A wooden bench, a flickering lamppost, a bulletin board with handwritten flyers. She stepped onto the gravel, her shoes crunching softly. Fog wrapped around her ankles like cold fingers. Theo paused beside her and pulled a small card from his coat pocket. "My daughter runs a cafe near the docks. If you need a warm meal or directions, tell her Theo sent you." Lena accepted the card gratefully. "Thank you for everything. Take care of yourself," he said, giving her shoulder a fatherly squeeze. People who break away from old lives, they tend to create beautiful new ones. When he walked away, disappearing into the fog, she felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest, a flicker of hope. She dragged her suitcase toward town. Bridgeton Harbor revealed itself slowly narrow streets, lined with weathered wooden buildings, ropes coiled neatly on posts, fishing boats rocking gently in the tide. The ocean stretched out beyond them, vast and indifferent, but something in that indifference comforted her. She found the cafe easily, the driftwood spoon. A pale blue door, steam fogging the windows. Inside warmth and the scent of clam chowder wrapped around her like a blanket. "Morning. What can I get you?" a woman called from behind the counter. She wore an apron flecked with flour and had a fierce, welcoming energy. Theo sent me," Lena said, holding up the card. The woman's face transformed into a grin. "Theo's daughter, Marin. Sit down, sweetheart, you look freezing. Soup's on the house." Lena blinked. "Really? I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing," Marin said firmly. "Anyone who arrives on the morning bus needs a meal and a little kindness. House rules." Lena sat in a corner, letting the warmth seep into her bones. Marin brought her a bowl of steaming chowder and a thick piece of buttered bread. As Lena ate, Marin leaned against the table. "So, what brings you here?" Starting over, the question hit deeper than Marin probably intended. Lena nodded slowly. "Something like that." "Well, you picked a rough place," Marin said. "But rough isn't bad. Rough is honest." Lena smiled faintly. "That seems to be the theme here." When she explained she needed work and a place to stay, Marin didn't hesitate. "Try the harbor office. Captain Ross is grumpy, but he needs hands. He might just take a chance on you. And there's an old caretaker's shed by the lighthouse you can stay in, if Ross approves it." "A shed," Lena repeated uncertainly. "Trust me," Marin said with a wink. "It's more shelter than most people get when they first land here." After finishing her soup, Lena made her way to the harbor office. Captain Ross was every bit as intimidating as Marin warned, broad-shouldered, sun-weathered, and suspicious of newcomers. "You ever done dock work?" he asked, eyeing her thin frame. "No," she admitted, "but I learn fast." He grunted. "Trial week. Dawn to noon. Pays low. Lodging's the old shed up on the cliff. Take it or leave it." "I'll take it," Lena said before doubt could interfere. Ross scribbled something on a clipboard. "Be on time. Don't quit by day 3 like the last 2. As she left the office, her heart hammered nervously. She wasn't strong. She wasn't experienced. She didn't know if she could handle dock work. But she could try. And trying was more than she'd ever been allowed to do at home. She followed the narrow path Marin described up a rocky incline past windswept grass toward a shape emerging through the fog. A lighthouse, tall, weather-beaten, noble in its silence. The old caretaker's shed stood nearby, leaning slightly, paint peeling from its siding. It was small and rough, but when she pushed the door open and sunlight spilled across the dusty floor, she felt something tighten and then loosen in her chest. "This is mine," she whispered. Her first space, her first beginning. She stepped outside and looked up at the lighthouse, its white tower cut through the fog like a guardian watching over the cliffs. "I don't know who I'll become here," she said softly, "but I'll give myself a chance." The lighthouse didn't answer, but the wind did, brushing against her skin like a whispered welcome. And for the first time in a long time, Lena felt the slightest pull toward a future she might actually want. The shed groaned under the weight of the morning wind, the old wood shifting like a sleeper stirring from a long rest. Lena jerked awake on the thin cot, her breath misting in the cold air. For a brief, blissful moment, she didn't remember where she was or where she wasn't. No raised voices, no slamming doors, no accusations disguised as parental concern. Then the lighthouse horn sounded a deep, resonant call rolling across the cliffs, and reality settled around her like an old coat. She was in Maine. She had a job trial. She had exactly $264 left in her bank account, and she had no plan except not going back. She pushed herself upright, wincing at the stiffness in her spine. The shed wasn't insulated, and the night temperatures had crept in like unwelcome ghosts. Still, as she stepped outside into the washed-out gold of sunrise, the world felt raw and promising. Seagulls cried overhead. The tide surged against the rocks. Fog clung to the cliffs like silk. This was not her parents' house. This was hers, even if temporary. She put on her only decent jacket and began the walk down to the harbor. It took her 10 minutes to realize she was lost. The fog thickened, swallowing the narrow path. Grass brushed against her jeans, dew soaking the fabric. She checked the directions Marin had scribbled on a napkin. Follow the lighthouse path until the fork. Left path takes you straight to the docks. Except she couldn't see a fork, or a path. A shadow emerged in the fog, broad-shouldered, carrying a toolbox. "You look like you're walking with purpose," a voice said dryly. "Unfortunately, it's the wrong direction." Lena startled. "Sorry, I can't see anything in this fog. It gets everyone their first week." The man stepped closer. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back into a low tie jacket flecked with sawdust. His eyes were striking river-clear blue with a hint of mischief. "I'm Elias. Lena." She offered a small, embarrassed smile. "I'm on my way to the docks. Or I was." "Lucky for you," Elias said, shifting the toolbox to his other hand. "I was heading there too. Come on." They walked side by side through the fog. He moved confidently, as if the cliffside were printed inside his mind. "You staying up at the lighthouse shed?" he asked. "Yeah, just moved in yesterday." "It's charming," she said diplomatically. Elias snorted. "That shed should have collapsed 5 years ago. Guess it likes you, or it's waiting for the right gust of wind." He laughed, a warm, startled sound. She found herself liking more than she should. When they reached the harbor, the fog thinned enough to reveal the bustling morning chaos. Fishermen hauling crates, nets being repaired, voices calling across the docks, the scent of salt water mixed with diesel, and the faint sweetness of fresh bait. Captain Ross spotted her immediately. "You're late. I got lost. You won't tomorrow." He thrust a pair of gloves at her. "Start by helping unload the lobster traps." The traps were heavier than they looked. Wooden frames lined with thick rope seaweed still dripping from their sides. As Lena struggled to lift the first one, her muscles protested sharply. She grit her teeth, steadying herself. Ross watched closely, expression unreadable. "Put your legs into it," he barked. "Back straight. Otherwise, you'll roll out of here with a slipped disc." She adjusted her stance, tried again, and managed to lift the trap into the cart. Ross gave a grunt that might have been approval but could have easily been indigestion. Hours passed in a rhythm of lifting, hauling, sorting, stacking. Each motion burned, but somewhere in the ache was something unfamiliar satisfaction. Elias reappeared mid-morning, strolling toward her with a half-smirk. "You're still alive. Impressive. My arms disagree. They'll get used to it. Or fall off. Hard to say." She laughed weakly. "Thanks for the vote of confidence." Elias leaned on a post, watching her work with a thoughtful expression. "Don't let Ross scare you. He's all bark." I figured. Good. Because the last guy he hired ran off crying when Ross told him his knots looked like drunk spaghetti. Lena tried not to laugh but failed miserably. By noon, her muscles trembled with exhaustion. When Ross finally dismissed her, she could barely feel her legs. She sat on a crate, sucking in the cold ocean air. "That was brutal," she muttered. "Day 1 usually is," Elias said, appearing beside her again. "Here." He handed her a bottle of water. "Hydrate. You look like you might faint." "Do I? You're very pale." "I'm always pale," she said, taking the bottle gratefully. "I burn in candlelight." He chuckled. "Good to know. I'll warn the bonfire committee." She took a sip, then asked, "So, what do you do around here, carpenter?" "I repair boats, docks, anything made of wood. Sometimes houses, sometimes hearts." She raised a brow. "Hearts?" he shrugged. "Only the wooden ones." She shook her head, smiling despite herself. As they talked, the fog lifted fully, revealing the rugged beauty of the harbor. Seagulls dipped low over the water. The lighthouse stood tall in the distance. For the first time, the place felt less like a strange off-the-map refuge and more like somewhere she could root herself. When she returned to the Driftwood Spoon for a late lunch, Marin greeted her with a knowing grin. "Survived your first morning, huh? Barely. Good. Means you did it right." As she ate, Marin leaned against the counter. "Ross says you worked hard. That's rare praise for him. Really, really. He once complimented a guy by saying, 'You don't make me want to fire you today.'" That guy cried. Lena laughed until her ribs hurt. Before leaving, she bought a few basic groceries: bread, canned soup, a small jar of honey, and stuffed them into her tote bag. The walk back to the lighthouse was easier in the afternoon light. The cliffs shimmered under the sun, and the shed looked a little less haunted than it had that morning. Inside, she unpacked her groceries, arranging them neatly on a crate she used as a makeshift shelf. Then she collapsed on the cot, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. But beneath the exhaustion was a feeling she couldn't quite name. Something small but powerful. Momentum. For the first time in her life, the path ahead was hers and hers alone. She lay on her back, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the distant crash of waves. Then she whispered something she had never dared say aloud at home, I think. "I belong here." The wind answered with a soft rustle against the shed's walls, almost like agreement. She smiled, tired, aching, hopeful, and closed her eyes, letting the sound of the ocean lull her to sleep. The wind rattled the shed door before dawn, yanking Lena from a dreamless sleep. Her arms screamed the moment she moved. Her shoulders felt like they'd been replaced with cement blocks. Every muscle in her body protested her attempt to sit up. She hissed in pain, clutching her side. "Okay," she muttered to herself. "So this is what dying feels like." A gull screeched outside in what felt suspiciously like mockery. She forced herself upright, grabbed the stale granola bar she'd bought yesterday, and ate it while staring at the lighthouse silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky. The keeper's walk, the winding cliff path running from the lighthouse to the harbor, looked sharper and steeper in the early light. Her body didn't want to move. Her spirit insisted she had to. She dragged herself out of the shed. The early air was salt cold and sharp enough to clear her foggy mind. Fog rolled low over the cliffs, hugging the coastline like a sleeping creature. The rocks glistened with dew. The crash of the ocean below was steady and grounding. Halfway down the path, she sensed someone behind her. "You look like you're heading toward your execution," Elias said, falling into step beside her. She groaned. "My execution would feel better than this." He gave her a sympathetic once-over. "So the trap's got you good." "My entire body is a trap now." "You'll toughen up," he assured. "Happens to everyone. I can barely feel my arms. That's normal. By week 2, you'll be able to lift a trap and curse Ross at the same time." She snorted despite the pain. "I'll take that as a milestone to look forward to." They walked in companionable silence. When the docks came into view, the world seemed to expand around her. Boats bobbed in the harbor. Nets dripped onto the wooden planks. Men shouted orders back and forth. "Ready for round 2, Elias asked. "No," she said truthfully. "But I'm here anyway." He grinned. "Good enough." Ross already had a list of tasks pinned to the side of his boat. "You two," he barked, pointing at Lena and Elias, rope sorting. "Those nets are a mess." Elias raised a brow. "You trust her with rope," Ross grunted. "She's got more sense than you do." Elias pressed a hand to his chest, as if gravely wounded. "I'll try not to weep." The rope work was easier than hauling traps, but required precision untangling, looping, fixing frayed ends, and matching the knots Ross insisted were the only acceptable knots in the universe. The salt water stung Lena's fingers. Rope fibers scratched her skin raw, but the repetitive motion began to calm her. "You're doing well," Elias said, sitting opposite her on an overturned crate. "That's generous of you." "No, really. You're learning fast." She glanced up, genuinely surprised. "Thanks. Don't let it go to your head. Too late," he laughed, shaking his head. When they finished the rope pile, Elias stood stretching. "Come on, lunch break. Tradition says. You've earned chowder today." You have chowder traditions. This is a very serious town. We take food extremely personally. They headed toward the driftwood spoon the sea breeze, carrying the scent of frying batter and fresh bread. Inside, the warmth hit her instantly, and Marin's grin widened when she saw them. Ah, new girl survived day 2 so far, barely Lena said. Good, barely means you're doing it right. Marin placed a steaming bowl of chowder in front of her thick broth, soft potatoes, tender clams, sprinkled herbs on top. Lena inhaled deeply. The smell alone felt like a warm blanket. She took her first spoonful and nearly moaned. This is the best thing I've ever tasted. Elias nodded sagely. Told you. As they ate, locals filtered and fishermen, boat mechanics, retirees who looked like they were carved from driftwood. Most greeted Elias with easy familiarity. A few eyed Lena with curiosity. New girl, a woman with a beanie, asked, sliding into the booth next to Elias. Lena, he said. This is Kara, runs the bait shop. Kara leaned over the table. Saw you yesterday. Thought you were gonna drop dead lifting those traps. I thought so too, Lena admitted. Kara grinned. Good. Means you're starting like the rest of us. The casual acceptance warmed her in ways she didn't expect. Mid-meal, Lena's phone lit up. Her mother's name filled the screen. Her stomach clenched. Hard. She turned the phone face down. Elias had been mid-bite but froze when he saw her expression. Everything okay? Yeah, she lied. He didn't believe her, but he didn't press. After lunch, their jobs shifted to patching nets. Lena's fingers felt like they were being shredded, but she refused to slow down. Ross passed by once, grunted approvingly, then walked off. By late afternoon, her clothes were soaked with seawater, her hair was tangled, and she had rope burns on both hands. But she was still standing. As they walked back up the cliffs, Elias carried his toolbox with ease, while Lena felt like her legs had turned into molten lead. You did good today, he said. She shrugged. I survived. That's good. Why do you keep repeating that? Because surviving around here is the first step to belonging. She paused. Do you think I'll belong? He slowed, meeting her eyes. I think you're trying. And that matters more than anything. She swallowed hard. I don't know if I've ever belonged anywhere. You will, he said simply. When they reached the shed, she hesitated. Elias waited with her hands in his pockets. Hey, he said quietly. If you ever want help fixing up the shed, I could take a look. Free of charge. She blinked. Why, he shrugged. Because you're living in a box that wheezes louder than a seal with pneumonia. She laughed despite herself. Okay, maybe this weekend deal. She watched him walk away through the tall grass, his figure outlined by the lavender-tinted sky. That night, fatigue hit her like a wave. She curled up on the cot, staring at the moonlight streaming through the cracked window, listening to the steady rhythm of waves pounding against the cliffs. Her phone buzzed again. Mother. She turned the phone off entirely. Her body ached, her hands were raw, her brain felt foggy. But she wasn't afraid. For the first time since running, she felt something settle inside her, something calm and wary, but undeniably alive. Tomorrow would be harder. Tomorrow she would rise anyway. She closed her eyes, letting the ocean sing her to sleep. The rain came before dawn, sharp cold drops hammering against the shed roof like thrown pebbles. Lena woke to the sound of water seeping through tiny cracks overhead, splattering onto the floor in irregular plinks. She groaned, rolling off the cot just as a drip landed exactly where her pillow had been. Perfect, she muttered, dragging a bucket under the leak. Her hands were still tender from yesterday's rope burns. Her shoulders ached. Her thighs felt bruised from climbing the cliff path. And now the shed had decided to mimic a sinking ship. She pulled on her damp jacket and stepped outside. The world was washed in gray. Mist clung to the cliffs. The lighthouse beam cut slow arcs through the storm. The keeper's walk was slippery, but she moved with careful determination. Halfway down, she spotted someone crouched near the path, Elias, adjusting a tarp over stacked firewood. He glanced up, water dripping from his hair. Morning? You look like you lost a fight with your shed. I think the shed is winning, she said. Do you know how to fix leaks? Yeah. But first you should probably get to work before Ross thinks you drowned. She huffed out a laugh. Fair. They walked together in the rain. He matched her slower pace without comment. When they reached the docks, Ross was already barking orders. Everything moved faster in a storm. Crates were hauled with urgency. Nets checked twice. Voices sharp strained. Ross thrust a coat at Lena. Storm gear. You'll freeze in that thing. Thank you, she said, startled. He grunted. Grab those buckets. We're bailing water until the pumps catch up. Rain hammered the deck. Waves slapped against the pier hard enough to shake her bones. Lena worked as quickly as her aching muscles allowed, scooping seawater and dumping it overboard. Her skin stung from the cold. Her fingers went numb. But she didn't stop. You're tougher than you look, Kara called over the storm, passing with a coil of rope. I'm too cold to quit, Lena shouted back. The chaos continued for hours. Boats rocked violently. Crew members shouted warnings. At one point, a crate slipped on the slick dock. Lena lunged to stop it, feet sliding. She almost toppled forward until a hand caught her elbow. Elias, careful, he said, voice taut. This place can bite. She steadied herself. Thanks. He didn't let go until he was sure she had balance again. By noon, the storm eased into a steady drizzle. Ross finally clapped his hands. Break. Lena collapsed onto an overturned bucket, chest heaving. Her hair was plastered to her face. Her clothes clung to her skin. She felt half dead. Elias dropped beside her. You okay? I think my soul left my body. It'll come back once you eat. She smiled weakly. I hope so. At the driftwood spoon, the windows fogged from the warmth inside. Marin handed them both steaming mugs of tea and bowls of hot stew. Lena wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into her fingers. You look like the storm dragged you across the bay, Marin said. I think it tried. You survived. That's what matters. Lena took a slow sip, the warmth spreading through her chest. But even as she relaxed, a tension she'd been holding tightly all day began to creep back up. Her phone was buzzing inside her damp pocket. She ignored it. Elias noticed. Parents again, she nodded. That why you're here? He asked softly. Running from them, Lena froze. She didn't know how to answer. Not without unraveling. Not without exposing everything she'd tried so hard to bury. I'm just trying to figure things out, she said. He nodded, accepting the boundary. Well, if you need to talk, I'm around. Carpenter by day, unofficial therapist by accident. She huffed a laugh. I'll keep that in mind. After lunch, Ross assigned them lighter tasks, sorting gear, wiping down crates, prepping nets for tomorrow. By late afternoon, the clouds cleared, revealing a pale, washed-out sky. When the shift ended, Lena expected to trudge back up the cliffs alone. Instead, Elias appeared beside her. Come on, he said. You wanted me to look at the shed today, right? You remembered. Of course, he shrugged. I figured you might want it fixed before it rains again. They walked together, the grass soft beneath their feet. When they reached the shed, Elias whistled low. You weren't kidding. This place is well weathered. That's a nice way to say falling apart. He set his toolbox down. Let me check the roof. Before she could protest, he climbed up with surprising ease. Lena stood below, watching him move, confidently scanning for damage. Here's your problem, he called down. Half the shingles shifted. Storm probably loosened them. I can fix it, but you'll need sealant and replacement shingles. How much will that cost? She asked nervously. Won't be bad. I'll keep it cheap. Lighthouse keeper would want it fixed anyway. She blinked in surprise. You knew him. Everyone knew him. Old Mr. Cormac. Lived here his whole life. Left the shed unlocked for travelers, drifters, or anyone needing a place to catch their breath. Lena swallowed. So I'm not the first person to hide here. No, Elias said, gently hopping down. But you might be the first one determined to stay. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. He stepped closer, brushing a stray hair from her face without thinking. then paused, hands suspended midair. She felt the warmth of his presence, even though he didn't touch her. "Hey," he said softly, "you're doing good, Lena." She didn't know why those words almost broke her. They were simple, but coming from him, someone who saw her effort, not her failures, they meant everything. He cleared his throat and stepped back. "I'll get supplies tomorrow and patch the roof. Shouldn't take long." "You don't have to, I want to," he interrupted. She nodded, overwhelmed. "Thank you." As he walked away, the sun dipped low, painting the cliffs in hues of amber and rose. The lighthouse beam turned on, slicing the sky with its steady pulse. Lena stood outside the shed, watching Elias until he disappeared down the path. Then she stepped inside and sank onto the cot. Her phone buzzed again. This time she looked. 10 missed calls, 4 texts. Her stomach churned, but she forced herself to read them. "Come home, Lena. We didn't mean what we said. Your behavior is irrational. Dad is worried. You're not thinking straight." Her chest tightened. She could hear her mother's voice, dripping with accusation disguised as concern. She could see her father's cold stare. She turned the phone off and tossed it onto the floor. Outside, a single gull cried into the fading light. The waves crashed steadily. The wind whispered against the boards of the shed. Lena curled her knees to her chest, letting silence fill the space around her. She had survived the storm. She had worked harder than she ever had in her life. She had new people who saw her differently. And for the first time since leaving home, she wasn't afraid of what tomorrow held. She closed her eyes and let the ocean's rhythm lull her toward sleep. The sun broke through the clouds in scattered beams, warming the cliffside, as Lena woke with a rare sense of stillness. For once the shed wasn't dripping. The air wasn't freezing. Her body didn't feel like it had been run over by a truck, just by a very tired bicycle. She stretched cautiously, testing her sore muscles. They protested, but not as sharply as before. When she stepped outside, the sky was a bright, clear blue. Seagulls spiraled overhead, and the lighthouse stood tall and resolute against the horizon. The ocean below glittered as if making up for the previous day's storm. She took a deep breath. "Okay, new day. Please be gentle." Halfway down the cliff path, she spotted Elias, waiting near the fork toolbox in hand. Hair tied back, sleeves rolled up. "You ready for your home makeover?" he called. "I'm ready for anything that keeps water off my face at 3 a.m. He grinned, gesturing for her to lead the way. Together they headed toward the shed. Lena unlocked the creaking door and stepped aside. Elias surveyed the space with a carpenter's critical eye. "You've got charm," he said. "Sheer desperate charm." "But charm?" She laughed. "It's all I can afford." "Lucky for you, charm is fixable. Leaks, too." He climbed onto the roof while she stayed below, passing up tools when needed. The rhythmic hammering and scraping filled the crisp morning air. For the first time, she noticed how the shed sat tucked against a natural stone alcove. How the wind sounded different here, softer, more muffled. It felt safe in a way she couldn't explain. Elias finished the roof in under an hour. When he jumped down, wiping sweat from his forehead, Lena felt a surge of gratitude stronger than she expected. "Thank you," she said. "Really?" He shrugged. "No big deal." "It is to me," she said quietly. He held her gaze for a moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then he cleared his throat. "Come on, Ross'll skin us if we're late." They started down the trail together. Today her steps felt lighter. At the docks, Ross handed her a clipboard. "Errand day," he said. "You're going to the bait shop, then the storage shack, then the tackle shed. Check inventory. Write what's low." Lena blinked. "You trust me with supplies," Ross grunted. "You can lift 50 pounds in a storm. You can count rope bundles." Lena smiled. "I'll do my best." Kara greeted her with a cheerful wave at the bait shop. Inventory day, did Ross lose a bet? "No idea," Lena said. "Well, welcome to the exciting world of counting worms, ice, and bait buckets." The list was long. But as Lena moved through the shelves, checking items and jotting notes, something surprising happened. Her mind quieted. The repetitive nature of the task soothed her. The smell of seawater, the hum of freezers, the distant cry of gulls, it all wrapped around her like a soft blanket. "You okay there?" Kara asked after a while. "Yeah," Lena said. "Kind of peaceful, actually." "Good. This job'll age you 30 years, so take the peace where you can get it." By midday, her list was complete. She headed back to Ross, who barely glanced at the clipboard before nodding. "Looks accurate," she blinked. "You checked that fast." "I've got eyes," Ross muttered, walking away. "Well," a voice said behind her, "you passed the Ross test again." Elias leaned against a wooden post, arms folded. "He trusts maybe 6 people in the whole town. If you get halfway on that list, you're winning." "That's encouraging," she said. He smirked. "For Ross, yes." They worked side by side through the afternoon. He showed her a few simpler boat repairs. She watched him pull apart a section of worn wood with expert ease, sawdust gathering around his boots. "You're really good at this," she said. "Family trade," he replied. "My dad built boats. I grew up with a hammer in one hand and a splinter in the other." She laughed softly. "Seems fitting." He glanced at her. "What about your family? They teach you anything that stuck?" The question unmoored her. She froze, one hand still holding a coil of rope. "No," she said after a long pause. "They taught me what not to be." Elias didn't push. He nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement, and kept sanding the wood. By late afternoon, the work slowed. Sunlight stretched long across the harbor. Lena rubbed her aching hands and felt her stomach rumble. Elias noticed. Chowder, she didn't need convincing. At the driftwood spoon, Marin fed them steaming bowls and crusty bread. Lena devoured the food like she hadn't eaten in days. Elias watched with a half smile. "You're hungrier today," he observed. "It's the roof repairs," she said. "Manual labor builds an appetite. You're adapting faster than most out-of-towners." "Is that a compliment highest form?" he said deadpan. She shook her head, smiling into her bowl. During a lull in conversation, her phone vibrated in her pocket. She ignored it. Again. But this time, Elias gently rested his forearms on the table and looked her in the eyes. "You avoiding something?" Lena exhaled slowly. "My parents. Do they know where you are?" "No. And I don't want them to." Elias nodded slowly. "Then forget the phone. You're building something new here. Maybe let this place be louder than whatever's on the other end of that call." His words lodged in her chest the way truth sometimes did. After eating, they walked back up the cliffs together. The sky glowed pink, the lighthouse beginning its nightly sweep. At the fork, Elias slowed. "Want company for the rest of the walk?" he asked casually. Her heart skipped. "Sure," she said. They walked the final stretch in silence, comfortable and easy. When they reached the shed, she noticed how different it looked. Already solid, repaired less like a temporary hiding place and more like a starting point. Elias hesitated at the door. "Your roof won't leak tonight." "That's honestly life-changing," he grinned. "Happy to help." She stepped inside but paused in the doorway. "Elias, yeah, I'm glad you're here." He scratched his jaw, suddenly shy. "Yeah, me too." He turned and walked away, boots crunching softly over the grass. Inside, Lena sank onto the cot, covering her face with both hands. Not from exhaustion, not from fear, but from the overwhelming relief of feeling safe. Wanted. Seen. The repaired roof didn't leak. The ocean murmured beyond the cliffs, and for the first time the shed felt warm. She stretched out on the cot, letting her tired body melt into the thin mattress. She wasn't fixed. She wasn't healed. But something in her, something buried deep under years of criticism and control, felt like it was finally waking up. She closed her eyes to the sound of the waves and let herself drift. Tomorrow, she decided she would keep moving forward. The knock on the shed door came just after sunrise, 3 sharp taps that made Lena jolt upright. For a moment, disoriented, she thought it was the storm again, but the sky outside was clear, pale blue streaked with early gold. The knock came again. She pulled on her jacket and opened the door. Captain Ross stood there. Her stomach dropped. His arms were crossed, expression more serious than usual. "Walk with me." She swallowed, nodding quickly. Whatever this was, it wasn't optional. They headed along the cliff path in silence, the morning breeze, brisk and salty. Lena's mind raced through every possibility. Had she messed up the inventory? Was she too slow? Had she somehow offended someone at the lighthouse overlook? Ross stopped and turned to face her. "You planning on telling us the truth anytime soon?" Her throat tightened. "About what? About running?" His voice wasn't angry, just firm. "About who you're hiding from." Lena's pulse hammered in her ears. I didn't think it mattered." "It matters," Ross said. "For your safety and ours." She looked away, blinking back the sudden burn behind her eyes. "I'm not dangerous, and neither are they. I just needed to get away." He studied her for several long seconds. "Let me say this plainly. You've got heart, you work hard, you don't complain, but secrecy is how people die out here." Her breath hitched. "Ross, I'm not in trouble, I swear. My parents are calling all over the damn coast looking for you." Lena froze. "What, got a call from a Portland harbor master this morning? Said 2 people have been asking about a young woman fitting your description." They sound frantic. Cold dread crept into her bones. Her parents, they had found the general area. How did they even find this town?" she whispered. "Doesn't take much. One person sees you, mentions a girl who looks lost. Rumors travel." She felt sick. "Are they coming here?" "Don't know," Ross replied. "But you need to figure out what you want before they do." Her knees felt weak, the cliff spinning slightly beneath her feet. Ross sighed, the sound surprisingly gentle. "Lena, I'm not your enemy. But I've seen people bring trouble with them without meaning to. I need to know whether keeping you on is going to put my crew at risk." "It won't," she said immediately, fiercely. "I swear, I'm not running from criminals or anything like that. Just suffocation." Ross raised an eyebrow. "Suffocation." She forced herself to breathe. Her words trembled, but she didn't run from them. They controlled everything she said. What I studied, where I worked, who I dated, what I wore. They told me I'd never make it without them. That I wasn't capable. She swallowed hard. They said leaving would prove I was unstable. Ross's jaw tightened, but not in anger, more like understanding. "People like that don't quit easy," he muttered. "No," she whispered. "They don't." He gave a slow nod. "All right, then here's the deal. You can stay. But if someone shows up causing trouble on my docks, I need to know ahead of time." She nodded quickly. "You will, I promise." "Good." Ross started back toward the trail. "Now quit standing around. We've got nets that need fixing." Despite the fear churning in her stomach, the sharpness of his tone made her exhale in something close to relief. He wasn't firing her. Not yet. On the docks, the day unfolded in a blur, coiling ropes, patching holes, and netting sorting gear. Her mind drifted toward fears she tried to bury. Every time a tourist walked by, she stiffened. Every unfamiliar voice made her heart jump. By noon, she was shaking enough that Marin noticed. "You look pale, sweetheart," Marin said as she set a bowl of chowder in front of her. "Eat." Lena forced a spoonful down. It tasted like cardboard. "You going to tell me who put that look on your face, Marin?" asked, leaning on the counter. Lena hesitated. Marin smirked. "Ah, so it's parents." Lena blinked. "How did you—" "Because only family can twist you up like that." Marin crossed her arms. "And because you flinch every time the door opens." Lena's chest tightened. "They're looking for me." "Of course they are." Marin tapped the counter. "Doesn't mean you owe them your life." "I don't want them here," Lena whispered. "Not in this place, so don't let them drag you back," Marin said simply. "It's not that easy. It never is." Lena stared into her chowder, trying to slow her racing thoughts. Later, Elias found her on the pier, struggling with a tangled stack of nets. He didn't say anything at first, just started working beside her, movements calm and methodical. After a while he spoke softly. "Heard Ross had a talk with you." Lena stiffened. "Everyone knows already, small town," Elias said. "Fog can keep out ships but not gossip," she groaned. "Great." Elias nudged her shoulder gently. "Relax, nobody's judging you. I'm not worried about judgment. What then? That they'll find me." He nodded. "Then we'll deal with it." She blinked at him. You're not alone here, Lena. You don't have to fight everything by yourself." The words hit her harder than she expected. After work he walked her halfway up the cliffs. The sea wind tugged at their jackets. The sky was painted in sunset orange. "You scared?" he asked. "Yes," she said honestly. "Good. Only idiots aren't scared." But being scared doesn't mean you go back to what hurt you. She breathed deeply, the weight of her anxiety pressing hard. "I don't know how to stop them." "Then learn." Elias stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But start by deciding what you want, not what they want for you." She met his eyes, searching for something solid, firm ground in a world shifting under her. "Okay," she whispered. "I want to stay." His smile was soft, relieved. "Then stay. We'll help keep you standing." They didn't move for a long moment. The wind rustled through the cliff grass. The lighthouse beam swept slow circles across the darkening sky. Then Elias stepped back. "You'll be all right," he said. One day at a time. When she reached the shed, she closed the door softly behind her. The repaired roof held firm, even as the evening breeze whispered outside. Her phone sat in the corner where she'd tossed it days ago. She walked over, stared at it, then powered it on. Dozens of messages flooded in immediately. Her mother frantic, her father cold and cutting. Each message tugged her back toward the life she fled. Each one filled her with dread. Then a notification appeared, one she hadn't expected. "Unknown number. We know where you are. We're coming." Lena felt the floor tilt beneath her. She sank onto the cot, heart pounding, the shed spinning. But she wasn't the same girl who ran away weeks ago. She whispered to herself, voice shaking but fierce, "I'm not going back." The lighthouse beam swept across the cliffs, steady and bright, guiding her forward. Not back. The shed felt smaller than ever as Lena stared at the message glowing harshly on her screen. "We know where you are. We're coming." Her pulse roared in her ears. Her legs felt weightless, unsteady, as if the wooden floor had softened into quicksand beneath her. She scrambled out of the shed, needing air, needing space, needing to run from the truth that was already sprinting toward her. The cliffs stretched out under the silver moonlight, wind scraping her cheeks. She braced her hands on her knees, trying not to panic. Footsteps approached fast. Lena Elias's voice low and urgent. "What happened?" She straightened slowly. "They found me." He moved closer, scanning her expression. "Your parents?" She swallowed, unable to force the words out. She handed him the phone instead. His jaw tightened as he read the message. "This wasn't them," he muttered. "This is different." "What do you mean your parents wouldn't send something like this? They'd call guilt trip, cry, manipulate. This is a threat." Her stomach twisted violently. Then Elias shook his head. "Not here. Come on. You're not staying alone tonight." "No, I don't want to bother. You're not bothering anyone," he cut in. "Marin and I already worry about you more than we admit. You need people around you. Let's go." He walked with her all the way down the cliff, never leaving her side, checking over his shoulder every few seconds. At the bottom, the lights of the driftwood spoon glowed warm against the darkening sky. Inside, Marin was wiping down tables. She took one look at Lena's face, her cloth dropping to the floor. "What happened?" Elias handed her the phone. Marin's expression changed instantly, softness, draining into a fierce, protective sharpness. "Sit down," Marin said, grabbing Lena gently by the shoulders. "Now." They eased her into a booth as Marin locked the cafe door and flipped the closed sign. Elias settled beside Lena, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, a steady presence in the storm unraveling inside her. Marin sat across from them. Sweetheart, listen to me carefully. This isn't your parents. This is someone else. Someone trying to scare you. But why? Lena whispered. I haven't done anything. I don't even know anyone here except you. Someone knows you're vulnerable, Marin said gently, or thinks they can push you out of town. Who would want that? Elias and Marin exchanged a loaded look. Elias finally said, people don't like newcomers messing with old structures, especially the lighthouse. Lena stared. What does the lighthouse have to do with anything? Marin leaned back, exhaling. This town, it isn't just fishing and fog. There's history, land disputes, old money, feuds so old nobody remembers how they started, and some people, especially the Winslows, don't want anyone staying at the lighthouse property. I didn't know it was an issue, Lena murmured. How could you? Marin softened. We didn't tell you because we didn't want to scare you, and because, honestly, you deserved a break from complicated things. Lena pressed a hand to her forehead. So now I have two problems, maybe, Elias said. Or maybe it's the same one coming from different directions. Marin frowned. Either way, you're not going back up that cliff alone. But the shed is a box held together by hope and nails, Elias finished, and if someone wants to intimidate you, that's the first place they'll go. Lena's breath hitched. What am I supposed to do? You're staying with me tonight, Marin said firmly. Elias will take my couch. What? No, you two don't have to, Lena. Marin gave her a look that ended the argument instantly. You are not alone. We take care of our own here. The phrase our own hit Lena like sunlight after a long winter. Warm, steady, undeniably real. They closed up the cafe and Marin led the way through town. Small houses lined the narrow streets, glowing golden behind frosted windows. Fog coiled low around the lamps. The harbor was quiet except for the whisper of waves lapping the docks. Marin's home was cozy, cluttered in a lived-in way with mismatched cushions and the faint scent of cinnamon. She handed Lena a soft blanket and guided her to the bedroom. You take the bed, Marin said. No arguing. I can't. You can, Marin insisted. You need sleep. Real sleep. Elias appeared in the doorway, pulling off his jacket. I'll be upstairs. If you need anything, just yell. Lena nodded, overwhelmed by the sudden kindness. Thank you, both of you. You'll be okay, Marin whispered, squeezing her shoulder. We'll figure this out. Hours later, after she brushed her teeth and changed into borrowed pajamas, Lena lay in bed staring up at the ceiling. The house creaked softly. The wind rattled outside. Far away, the lighthouse beams swept across the night in peaceful arcs. But sleep refused to come. The message replayed in her mind. The cold threat, the certainty behind it. Eventually unable to hold, still she slipped into the hallway. Elias sat on the couch, legs stretched out, reading a book under a dim lamp. He looked up the second she stepped forward. Can't sleep. She shook her head. Sorry, don't apologize. She hesitated. Do you think they're coming tonight? He set the book down. No. People who send threats usually do it to rattle you, not act immediately. That doesn't make me feel better. I know. He patted the couch beside him. Sit. She did. The room was quiet except for the distant sound of waves and the soft buzz of the lamp. Elias studied her face with calm, steady eyes. You really scared? He asked. Yes, she whispered. Not just of them. Of losing what I've found here. He rested his arm along the back of the couch, close enough for warmth to radiate between them. You won't lose it. How can you be sure? Because you're not alone anymore, he said simply. People here care about you. I care. Her breath caught. The sincerity in his voice was disarming, unexpected, grounding, terrifying in a beautiful way. She looked away before her emotions spilled over. Thank you. For everything. Try to sleep, he said softly. Tomorrow we'll talk to Ross. We'll figure out who sent that message. You're safe here, Lena. I promise. His voice wrapped around her like the warmest blanket she'd ever known. She nodded slowly. Okay. Good. He smiled slightly. Now go before Marin comes down and thinks I'm hitting on you. Lena's cheeks warmed. She mumbled goodnight and slipped back to the bedroom. This time when she lay down, her heartbeat wasn't frantic. The house felt safe, protected, watched over. And as sleep finally tugged her toward darkness, she realized something that made her chest ache. This was the first night in years she wasn't afraid of being alone with her thoughts. Lena woke to the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen and the soft clatter of dishes. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. The bed beneath her was warm, the blanket soft, the air still. No wind shoving against thin walls, no dripping roof, no icy drafts crawling down her spine. Then she heard Marin humming off-key, and the memory slid into place. She was safe, at least for now. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, her body heavy, with a mix of exhaustion and lingering fear. Her phone sat on the nightstand, turned off. She didn't touch it. Not yet. Not until she was certain she could breathe without shaking. In the kitchen, Marin flipped pancakes with the confidence of someone who never doubted gravity. Elias sat at the small dining table, hair still damp from a shower, sipping from a chipped mug. "Morning," Marin said brightly. "Hope you're hungry." Lena blinked. "You made pancakes," Elias smirked. "She makes them for all her strays." Marin threw a dish towel at him. "You're the stray boat boy. She's a guest." Lena couldn't help it, she laughed, the sound surprising her, lighter than anything she'd felt in days. Marin pushed a plate toward her. "Eat. Then we're going to figure out who decided to send you a threat." The laughter died on her lips. "Right." Elias leaned forward. "Did you sleep at all?" "Some," she admitted. "Enough," he nodded, satisfied. "Good. You need your strength." Marin poured syrup on all 3 plates with the authority of a general distributing rations. "After breakfast, we head to the docks. Ross needs to hear everything." Lena stiffened. "I don't want him to think I'm trouble." "Too late," Elias said. "Everyone in this town is trouble in their own way. You'll fit right in." Marin cackled. Lena wasn't sure whether to be comforted or concerned. After they finished eating, the 3 headed outside. Fog hung low over the harbor, thick enough to blur the boats into ghostly outlines. The air tasted like salt and morning chill. Ross was already pacing near his boat, barking orders as usual. When he caught sight of them particularly, Lena sandwiched between Marin and Elias, his frown deepened. "You look worse than yesterday," he said to Lena. "Did you sleep in a ditch?" "She slept in my guest room," Marin snapped. "And she's got something to tell you." Ross folded his arms. "Well, spit it out." Lena took a breath. The words felt sharp in her throat. "Someone sent me a message last night. They said they knew where I was. And they're coming." Ross's frown hardened. "Show me." Elias held out the phone. Ross read the message, jaw flexing. "This wasn't your parents," he said flatly. "That's what Elias said," Lena murmured. "Parents don't warn you," Ross said. "They just show up." A chill skittered down her spine. "Then, who?" Ross turned toward the harbor. "There are a few families in this town who don't like anyone near the lighthouse property. Old grudges, old money, old attitudes." Marin added, "The Winslows especially. They've been fighting with the Historical Society for years." "But why threaten me?" Lena asked. Elias sighed. "Because you're living on land they think they own. They've fought everyone who's tried to restore that lighthouse." Lena blinked. "Restore?" Ross turned to her. "You ever wonder why that building is still standing after decades? Someone keeps patching it just enough not to fall. Someone who doesn't want it formally inspected or restored. And that someone sent the message," Elias said. Lena's stomach twisted. "I didn't mean to get in the way. I didn't even know about any of this." Ross rubbed a hand over his beard. "Well, now you do. And whoever sent that message, they'll try again." Marin planted her hands on her hips. "So what do we do?" Ross looked at Lena. "You decide. You staying here? Or running again?" The words smacked into her chest. Running. Again. She closed her eyes for a moment. In her mind, she saw her parents' house, cold walls, sharp voices, endless rules. She saw the shed, small, imperfect, but hers. She saw the lighthouse tall, stubborn, refusing to fall even when storms tried to tear it down. "I'm not leaving," she said quietly. Elias exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Marin smiled fiercely. Even Ross seemed satisfied. "Good," Ross said. "Then you need to prepare." For what, she asked. "For the Winslows." The rest of the morning was a blur of work-heavy crates, coiled ropes nets that smelled strongly of low tide. But Lena noticed something subtly different. People watched her more closely. Not suspiciously, but protectively. Kara swung by with a spare pair of gloves. Jonah, the tall fisherman with the perpetually serious expression, offered her a thicker coat. It was as if the whole harbor had silently agreed she was under their wing now. By noon, she stood beside Elias repairing a railing when a man approached, tall, thin, wearing a tan jacket and a disapproving expression that suggested he smelled something unpleasant. "Excuse me," he said sharply. "Are you Lena Harper?" Her heart nearly stopped. "Yes." Elias stepped between them in an instant. "Who's asking?" The man lifted his chin. "My name is Victor Winslow. My family owns the land surrounding that lighthouse. You're trespassing." Lena's blood went cold. I didn't know." Captain Ross said. Ross appeared behind them like a summoned storm. "I said she could stay. Until the council meets." Victor's eyes narrowed. "She has no legal right." "You don't either," Ross snapped. "Your family never got the deed transfer approved. The land's still classified as historical property." Victor glared at Lena with sudden venom. "You need to leave the shed. Today." Before she could speak, Marin stormed over. "She's not going anywhere. This is none of your business, Marin. It's my business when people threaten my staff," she shot back. Victor scoffed. "Threaten, please. I'm merely advising her to avoid future complications." Elias stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "Back off." Victor's lips thinned. "Fine. But consider this your only warning." He looked at Lena again, his gaze sharp enough to cut. "Some places aren't meant for outsiders." He turned and walked away, coat snapping in the wind. Lena stood frozen breath, trembling. Elias touched her arm gently. "You okay?" "No," she whispered. "Not even a little." Marin wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Ignore him. The Winslows think they own half the coast." "They don't," Ross grunted. "He's a snake with a fancy haircut, nothing more." Their attempt at comfort helped, but only slightly. Because Victor's threat hadn't felt like an empty gesture, he had spoken with the certainty of someone used to getting what he wanted. And he wanted her gone. But later, as she walked up the cliff path with Elias beside her, the lighthouse rising tall against the evening sky, she realized something else. She wasn't facing any of this alone. Not anymore. When they reached the shed, Elias lingered. "You scared?" he asked. "Yes," she admitted. "But you're staying." She nodded. He gave a small, proud smile. "Good." As she stepped into the shed, the repaired roof steady over her head, she felt a strange surge of strength. Fear still lived inside her, coiled like a sleeping snake, but something else lived there too. Resolve. And the lighthouse outside, tall and weather-beaten, pulsed with light, as if echoing that resolve back at her. Lena barely slept. Every time the wind brushed against the shed, she jolted awake, bracing for footsteps, for voices, for the knock that would end everything she'd managed to build. By dawn, she felt hollowed out, tired down to the marrow. Yet when she walked the cliff path toward the harbor, something stubborn kept her legs moving. Fear pressed against her ribs, but so did determination. The lighthouse beam faded in the early light behind her, but she imagined it watching, keeping guard. On the docks, the usual clang of metal and chatter of fishermen filled the morning air. Jonah waved as she approached Kara, handed her a thermos of coffee, and even Ross gave her a grunt that might have been a greeting. But she didn't miss how eyes flicked toward her more often. People knew. Victor's visit had spread through town like wind through tall grass. "Lena." Ross jerked his head toward the boats. "With me." She followed him toward a small tugboat at the far end of the pier. Its name, the Mistral, was painted in peeling dark blue letters along the hull. "Hop in," Ross said. She blinked. Where are we going? To settle something, Ross replied, stepping aboard. Elias appeared behind her, wiping his hands on a rag. You taking her? I'm not asking permission, Ross said, starting the engine. Elias hopped on before Lena could speak. Then I'm coming too. Ross sighed, but didn't object. Lena climbed into the boat, heart pounding, her stomach twisting with unease. The tugboat pulled away from the harbor, cutting across the choppy water. Gulls circled overhead. Fog clung to the surface like a living thing. Where are we going, Lena? Repeated, gripping the metal railing. To the Winslow estate, Ross said. If they're going to harass you, they'll answer to me. Lena's breath caught. Ross, I don't want to escalate. It's already escalated, he snapped. You didn't start this. Elias crossed his arms, glaring at Ross. Don't scare her, Ross grunted. She deserves to know the truth. What truth? Lena whispered. Neither answered immediately. The Winslow estate appeared through the fog like something out of another century. Massive white columns, immaculate grounds, multiple guest houses, and a private dock with a sailboat tied neatly at its end. It radiated old money and old grudges. Ross killed the engine. Stay behind us. Victor Winslow emerged from the boathouse, dressed in an ivory sweater and carrying a clipboard. His expression twisted when he saw the trio approaching. Ross, Victor said coolly. To what do I owe this intrusion? You sent a threat. Ross held up Lena's phone. Explain. Victor glanced at the screen, unimpressed. I sent no such thing. Elias stepped forward. Cut the crap. Victor smoothed his hair back. You insult me. If I wanted someone to leave, I'd say it directly, not through childish messages. Lena swallowed. Then who did? Victor shrugged. Possibly someone who knows you're squatting on land that isn't yours. Historical property, Ross corrected sharply. You don't own it. For now, Victor said. The way he said it made Lena's skin crawl. Victor studied her with cold curiosity. You're braver than I expected. Most newcomers disappear after one conversation with me. Lena felt Elias stiffen beside her. Victor leaned in as if sharing a secret. And you should leave.